everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for day 2 of the Midwest Oracle User Group and the Chicago Oracle User Group virtual conference sponsored by Viscosity North America. We're super excited to have you. It's a whole week of lunch break session, so I hope you join us every day at 12 p.m. Central. We've got a great lineup of speakers, including our 2 speakers today. My name is Monica Lee. I'm the Marketing Director at Viscosity North America, and I'm also your conference chair for the Midwest Oracle User Group. So if you do frequent this conference in person, you may recognize me or may have heard from me before. If not, hi, hello. Hopefully we'll see you in person again next year, along with Rich Nemec, President of MOOG, and Alfredo Abate, President of the Chicago Oracle User Group. So a few little house rules before we get started. You are totally welcome to ask questions throughout today's presentation. There is a questions portion of your GoToWebinar control panel that you can type in, and it is a live webinar, y'all. So make sure you know, like, we can see your questions. We will try to get to them when we can, and it most likely will be at the end of the session. We will probably go over in time just a little bit today, so if you can stay with us, awesome. If not, my awesome colleague Katie will send you a recording of today's session. So I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Midwest Oracle User Group President, Rich Nemec. He's also the Chief Innovation Officer here at Viscosity.
Thank you so much, Monica, and I really appreciate all the work you do, Monica, in setting these up and working with me to get the mailers out. So thank you so much. I want to welcome everybody. I believe our next conference will certainly be in person, but at this time we're going to do one more virtual just so we can get most of the people here that want to be there. Just to let you know, the rest of the week, yesterday we had Willie Hardy. We will have that eventually for recording. And today I'll talk about in a moment. Tomorrow I'll be the speaker on Oracle Machine Learning and Robotic Process Automation. That will cover just basic business algorithms and tell you these are things you can use SQL and Oracle to do some amazing things for your company. Thursday, Burchin, Kaplan Oglu will be speaking on Oracle. I heard that laugh. Yeah, I'm a little hard on that pronunciation, but he's going to talk about the new Oracle Innovation Center in Chicago. There are only 2 in the world. One of them is in Chicago, Illinois. And he's going to talk about how they built that using Oracle connected with robots that did, checking of the work as it was being built. All kinds of things with a smart home and some of the utility companies, some of the things they are doing to very quickly look for outages and things like that. On Friday, we have Marcus Arancibia, and he is going to talk about, you've got a model with machine learning, now what? Take me to the next step. And it's going to be a little more advanced on machine learning. But today, we're going to talk about the COVID app and some of the infrastructure that they did. But before we do that, I have to thank our sponsor and allow him to give you a quick a blurb. So I'm going to pass it over to Katie Barnes at Viscosity, and thank you for sponsoring today.
Thank you so much, Rich. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. My name is Katie Barnes, Account Manager at Viscosity. We are very excited to be sponsoring this conference and are looking forward to a great week ahead of us. Before we get things started, I'm just going to briefly introduce you guys to Viscosity and go over some of our different areas of expertise. Viscosity is an Oracle partner. We work very closely with Oracle Product Management, and we have 4 Oracle ACEs among our leadership. At our core, we help businesses adapt and thrive with the changing needs, demands, and technologies that businesses face. Many Oracle customers are increasingly relying on professional service partners like ourselves to serve as trusted advisors and help make better purchasing decisions in an area that is constantly evolving. Our business model at Viscosity is designed to implement technologies and solutions that will ensure your challenges and goals are met with, and we do this by building close relationships with individuals like yourself, being an open and honest resource, and showcasing our areas of expertise through our webinars and workshops like the one you're about to watch today. So our areas of expertise really fall under 3 pillars: data, apps, and infrastructure. A large bulk of our business is on the database side, including data integration, data warehousing, zero downtime migration to latest versions, including 19C, and overall we help improve performance at the database level. In our applications practice, we do a lot of Apex development, EPM, ERP, we develop custom apps. And lastly, our infrastructure and hardware practice includes Oracle's public cloud offering, bare metal, engineered systems. We were actually named Oracle's ODA Partner of the Year back in 2019. So as you can see, we're very active and recognized within the Oracle community. We do pretty much everything when it comes to Oracle, but these are some of our more broadened areas of expertise. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have a very close relationship with Oracle. The people that you see here on this slide represent some of Viscosity's leaders and our Oracle ACEs. These guys present at Open World and Oracle user group conferences all over the globe, and they are eager to meet with your team and help uncover how we can best support you. Trust me when I say there's nothing better than having 4 ACEs at your hand. So this slide showcases some of our other services, and I'll just briefly highlight a few of them. In our team at Viscosity, we have experts on Oracle license management that have actually come from Oracle and worked in that space for several years. We provide all of our customers with the best knowledge and the best practices on how to manage and maximize your Oracle investment. Obviously, an extremely important aspect for businesses. We are probably most known for our zero downtime migrations and upgrade services. We've helped customers migrate from AIX to Linux with zero downtime, and more recently have been helping our customers with upgrading to Oracle 19C. With our performance health checks, we can fix pain points before they become real problems for our customers. Definitely another popular service of ours. And lastly, we have a full stack of DBA services as well. If you have any questions about our services, please reach out to one of us. We are always happy to answer any questions that you might have. This slide showcases some of the work that Viscosity has put into becoming trusted advisors who have actually written the books on Oracle's latest technologies and versions, anything from virtualization, pluggable databases to Oracle Exadata. If any of the books that you see on this slide interest you, or if you're even interested in connecting with one of us, reach out to me and I'd be more than happy to share our resources with you and your team. Okay, last slide before I pass it back over to Rich to introduce today's speakers. If you haven't already checked out our events page, please do so using the URL you see here, viscosityna.com/event. We update this page on a monthly basis with our webinars, workshops, and other events that we have going on, and it is a really great resource. I will be sending out a copy of the slides and a recording of today's presentation to everyone later this afternoon, so just be on a lookout for an email from me. Sometimes they can go into your junk or spam folder, so just be aware of that. If you have any questions in the meantime, please email me directly. My email address is here at the bottom of the slide, or feel free to ask us questions during the presentation. So with all that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and pass it back over to Rich so he can introduce today's speakers.
Okay, while we're bringing up Nitin and Leachy's slide, just want to let you know Nitin Vengulekar, Chief Technology Strategist for all of government education, formerly Oracle Public Sector. His primary responsibility is working with C-level execs on strategic accounts to ensure proper alignment and deployment of Oracle technologies. He's also responsible for working with Oracle sales engineers to ensure they understand well the product positioning and roadmap. He is a former Oracle ACE director. You can't be an ACE director when you're at Oracle. Author of 7 books, and serves as a curriculum board member of several Dallas area colleges. In addition to that, today we have Leachy Tian. He is technical director at Oracle. He is a middleware expert, focuses on app development and integration as technical director. He has delivered 100+ projects for customers across many industries, including government. And so he's also doing things like microservices, DevOps consulting, and things like that he actually has ran as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Nitin. Fire away, Nitin.
Hey, thanks, Rich. Thanks, Monica. Thanks, Katie, for the great intro and setting this up for us. We're going to be talking about the COVID patient testing and vaccination system, really from the design, from the thought process, all the way to deployment. And this really is a real world use case study. It's not a product pitch. It's not a marketing pitch. This is what we went through in the trenches. But first off, I should say, I'm a fellow Chicagoan, so I'm thrilled to be back home virtually, if you will. And Interestingly enough, Lychee, who is my co-presenter, is also from Chicago. So we got a little Chicago theme going on here. So with that, I'm going to kick off the presentation here. Little intro. I know Rich already did a great intro, so I won't go into too much. My name is Nitin Van Garlikar. I am the Chief Technology Strategist in the newly renamed Government and Education, which used to be formerly Public Sector. I've written several books. 6 of them are displayed here. Interesting enough, I should say, even though my key role is really working with CIOs, CTOs, and C-level executives in our strategic areas, whether it's federal, state, and local, or higher education. When COVID hit, we had to pivot. I had to pivot. Everybody else had to pivot. Specifically in my area, I had to actually roll up my sleeves and be a chief architect, OCI architect, and data architect to get this application rolled out. So we had dual roles we played here. Again, my Twitter handle is down below. If you need anything, if you had follow-up questions, comments, anything else, just fire them away at that Twitter handle. And I'm going to turn it over to Lychee for you to do your intro, Lychee.
Hey, thank you, Nitin. My name is Lychee Tian, and I'm a consulting technical director at Oracle. From my experience perspective, I'm specialized in the Oracle Fusion middleware for the application development as well as the integration. So for this product, there are 2 products. Yeah, Nitin just said he is handling the legacy testing system, and after that, I'm the chief architect for the our new system that is for the vaccination. So that's pretty much from my side, and you can reach me at my email address I listed over here. So Nitin, go ahead, I hand back to you.
All right, thanks, Lychee. So safe harbor, I don't plan on talking about futures. I may let a little 23C slip in there, but do not make purchasing decisions based on future conversations or future points being made. All right, so let's go through the agenda real quick, right? So we're going to go through and talk about what the application was. How do we even get to a point where we're even building an application such as this? And what were we designing? And I should mention that for those of you guys who attended last year, I did present a very similar topic. Actually, it was the COVID application that we built, but that was July of 2020. A lot has changed. We knew the vaccination is coming. A vaccination was put together. We acted accordingly and built a vaccination system on top of this legacy system, which I'll go into a little bit here. So for those of you guys who see this as a very familiar presentation from last year, it is the first part of it may be familiar, but we built quite a bit of integration and augmentation of the application to support the vaccination system as well. So anyway, back to the agenda, we're going to talk about what the customer requirements were when we launched this project, and what were our internal requirements. Then we'll talk a little bit about the legacy application. Legacy being what did we build back in March of 2020? Talk about some of the raw materials, our design thought process. Then go into design decisions. Why did we pick what we picked? What were the platform choices we made? Then we'll jump in and Lychee will talk a lot more about the vaccination system, specifically around the key Apex feature usages and integration, how we rolled in and integrated Apex with IDCS, with the mobile app components, dynamic questionnaires. And we'll end it with some of the advantages of why Autonomous played a huge part and where Apex actually played a huge part in making this a successful deployment. All right, so to the requirements. So, let's put our mindset back in March of 2020, right? March of 2020, pandemic was just starting to hit. We had a lot of state and local areas being hit with this thing, trying to figure out how to get tested, how to get their people tested, how to get the healthcare workers tested. So there was a coalition of partners and vendors. Oracle was one of them. And we were approached by a county in California to develop a patient testing system for COVID, specifically for the first responders initially, right? So we got into a conversation about how to build the system out, what the requirements would be, how fast we would turn that around. We did a mock-up, we did some wireframes, we did a small little POC. Once we showed it to the county, they looked at it and said, we like this. Can you build us a training environment that we can just test off of? So we did that for a couple weeks. They loved it. They came back and said, can we put this in production in 3 weeks? So from the time we actually did a small little wireframe and POC and documentation write-up to the time we rolled it out in production, it was literally about 4.5 weeks to 5 weeks. So very, very quick. So that was one of the requirements, is that they needed to have this thing in place very quickly. It's not like a traditional app, which may have taken 2 or 3 months to roll out. We just didn't have the comfort or the affordance to have a system that was going to be taking 3 months to roll out. We had to build this thing very, very quickly. The other thing is the county said, if we're going to roll this out, it has to be adaptable. It's got to, there's CDC guidelines were constantly changing, as you can recall, back in March and April, and it had to be agile and it had to scale, right? There's a lot of things changing. A lot of counties are coming on, a lot of cities within those counties are coming on board. So we had to adapt to that. And finally, most importantly, from the counties, our customers, governance rules had to be met, right? We are hosting and housing PII, PHI data, as well as HIPAA data. So we had to make sure that we met these governance rules, right? So bottom line is that we had to be agile and we had to be secure. And most important point, and key takeaway here, this was a free service, right? When we developed this application, rolled it out, made changes, even the vaccination system that Lechi was in charge of, this was a free system that we gave to the counties. But although it was free to the counties, we as a coalition, we still had internal costs we had to bear. We still had infrastructure, we had CapEx costs we had to bear. We had operational expenses we had to bear, manpower expenses that we had to bear. So keep in mind that context as we go through the session about how we had to deal with costs. So those were the outbound or customer requirements. We had our own internal requirements. First and foremost, we didn't have a full-time staff to support this. We had people coming, rolling off projects. What I was doing was a chief technology strategist, but I also had to roll up my sleeves and be it data architect, OCI architect. But because we didn't have a full-time staff, we couldn't focus a lot of our attention on operational things like backups, patching, monitoring, all those things. We really had to look at hard and see how we can maintain this thing at a decent cost. And we really wanted to focus on really the high value tasks. We didn't want to focus on the menial database responsibility tasks. We wanted to focus on the data model, addressing customer needs. They were constantly changing requirements for the UI, so we had to make sure that was in place. And we're building we're changing the environment on a regular basis. We were adding new code changes, so it was continuous integration, continuous development. We had fast build outs from non-prod environments. So we had an environment where we can quickly build out new systems and roll those out, new training environments. From a data governance, like as I mentioned before, our counties were really weighing heavily on data governance. We did that too. Keep in mind, Oracle has a very large Oracle governance organization, and they had quite a bit of oversight into this process as well. They were making sure that we didn't let data leak. We didn't make sure that data that was personal PII or PHI data didn't get exposed inadvertently. So we actually built a data glossary as part of this process. We did that in order to identify what was important data, what was confidential, what was public data, who had access to it and when. And most importantly, since we were building non-prod environments, we had to make sure that that data was masked and redacted. And finally, as it wasn't already obvious by now, data security was a tier 1 task, right? So again, we didn't have a full-time security staff, so we needed to have some mechanism where we can do automated and routine security checks. We needed to make sure data protection was on day 1 and auditing was on day 1. Data security could not be a bolt-on approach. It had to be a day one task. So bottom line, we had to be agile, we had to be flexible, and we had to be secure. So here's what we didn't know, right? Oops. here's what we didn't know. We didn't know if COVID was a 6-month project, a 1-year project, a 2-year project. We didn't know how long COVID was going to last, and vaccination in March of 2020 wasn't even a thought at that time. So this was a pretty daunting task, and we didn't know what counties were going to subscribe. Initially, we had talked to that county in California, but there's a whole bunch of other counties that were going to come on board. We didn't know what that rate was going to be. We didn't know what the patient registration rate was going to be. Patient registration being how fast can we check in, check out these patients. And we didn't know what a patient was going to be. Initially, it was going to be first responders, but we had murmurs that from CDC guidelines and county guidelines that they wanted to start testing healthcare workers, teachers, anybody else in the front lines. So there's also timeliness of results. There were some guidelines from the counties as well as CDC saying that once a patient was tested, the turnaround time to get those results had to be within a certain amount of time. So we had to deal with those changes, as well as analytics. The public counties wanted to see this data, who was being tested, what geographic area was being tested, what were the demographics that were people were being tested. That plus the CDC guidelines had to be implemented within the system as well. And finally, again, like I said, we didn't know how much the staff were. We didn't know if this was going to be a 2 or 3 man staff, 5 man need them for. So tons, we didn't know how to make this thing happen initially, right? So that brings us to our application and infrastructure design, right? So as a coalition, we thought through this process, thought about how we're going to scale, how we're going to make this thing cost efficient, even though it was free for the counties, it was a cost for us, as I mentioned. So how are we going to do this from a cost, manpower, capital expense perspective? So we tossed around the idea of having it hosted in a neutral environment. We even talked about putting it in AWS and Azure, and obviously in Oracle. So after going through all that process and thinking about how we're going to maintain the cost and make sure this thing's going to get rolled out in about 4 or 5 week time frame, we came up with this cloud stack, if you will. Right. So we picked autonomous database, specifically ATP shared. We picked Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, specifically these OCI services: data safe, data catalog, IDCS, load balancer servers, serverless functions, API gateway, and Apex and ORDS, right? These are all key, monumental, foundational products and services that made this application succeed. And we really couldn't have done this any other way. And we talked about the idea of doing it on AWS, but that would have incurred a lot of operational overhead as far as maintaining backups and all those things that we didn't want to do. So there's absolutely no way we could have done this on any other platform. And that's my little product pitch, if you will. But this stack right here was the stack we chose based on the time frame we needed to roll this out. So let me go through a little bit about how we even chose this stack. Yes, it was obvious that since we're Oracle, we picked OCI, but there's other coalition members who had a say so in this, right? So we had to pitch and give an idea about why we picked these specific stack components. So I'll go through some of our thought process. Why autonomous? First and foremost, like I said, data security was the utmost importance. Governance was the utmost importance. So autonomous database had out-of-the-box security. All data was encrypted at rest using TD. So TD is always on, and OCI, it's specifically autonomous. All network connections from clients to ADB, whether they're coming from different platforms, different areas, functions, they all had to go through this encrypted process. And for those guys who don't know what TLS is a secure TCP, this cryptographic protocol. So all autonomous databases use a TLS encryption by default. That's how they do authentication. Data Vault is on by default. And these two bullet points, these bottom two bullet points were probably the biggest checkbox for us and for the counties. And this is how we got the green light. Because of ADB demonstrated HIPAA fitness through these attestations, and the fact that it was SOC 1 and SOC 2 compliant gave us the green light to move forward with this. And we had to prove this to the counties that this was the viable and doable platform to do this. And again, not only was it out-of-the-box security, we also did our own hardening. We also went through and made sure that certain privileges and rules were all nailed down, and we had to make sure we had user assessments that were done on a regular basis. So let me go through some of the feature functionality, which also kind of contributed why we chose autonomous, right? First of all, provisioning was very fast. It was 5 to 6 minutes to provision a database. Nightly backups were or offloaded, right? That's all done through the autonomous process. We didn't have to deal with that. Patching was fully offloaded. And interestingly enough, when we kicked off this project in March of 2020, we actually started out with 18C, and we went through the whole automated upgrade and patching capabilities of autonomous, and we've been patching on a bi-monthly basis, if I recall correctly. So all that was done without our intervention. That really allowed us to really focus on some of the key high-value things. Auto scaling was extremely important. If you keep in mind, when we kicked off the project, we only launched it for a small set of cities and one county. And certain set of first responders. So we didn't know what to scale up to. So we set it up to 4 OCPUs initially, and it scaled all the way up to 12 when it needed to, and scaled back when we didn't use it. So auto scaling allowed us to really do this without having to monitor the system on a daily basis and bump up OCPUs manually. Auto indexing was huge. Initially, we were kind of leery of it. We weren't sure how this was going to behave. And in fact, the first week or two, we were looking at AWR reports on a regular basis to make sure that it was behaving correctly. And we even turned on auto indexing from a reporting perspective to see how well it was going to behave. And sure enough, it did the right job. And after a while, after the second month of this deployment in production, we just left it on its own, and auto indexing took care of all that for us. So a huge impact for us because it allowed us to really focus, like I said, on the high value tasks. Other key capabilities, fast clones, as I mentioned before, we were creating non-prod environments for training, testing, and all the net new development we were doing. So we needed to create net new environments that had real data in it. So we use fast clone alongside with data masking. Autonomous data guard was a one-click button approach. We just clicked one button and said we want to turn on data guard, and it did all that for us. We didn't have to have any senior DBAs sit around to actually enable data guard for us. And data guard was very, very pivotal because it allowed us to really switch over databases when we're doing patching for this automated patching that's going to come in place. And keep in mind, this was a 24/7 system. We had people, first responders, healthcare workers being tested and checking in and registering on a 24/7 basis. So this was a true 24/7 system. Observability and performance analytics was key for us to give us kind of a nice little view of how the entire system was behaving, right from the load balancers through the app servers, Apex, as well as the database. So really kind of give us a holistic view of how well the system was performing. And finally, this simple integration with OCI services. And I'll talk more about DataSafe here in a minute. But everything I mentioned up to this point, autonomous data guard, DataSafe, data catalog, all these feature functionality that I mentioned up to this point are all free for us to use, not because we're Oracle employees, because we're Oracle subscribers. So for those of you guys listening out there, if you're an OCI database customer, you get all these feature functionality, OCI services free as part of your subscription. There's no added fees for this thing. This is built in as part of your subscription model. So why DataSafe? Again, like I said, because we had to showcase our security capabilities on a routine basis. In fact, every Monday morning, we looked at our security dashboard to make sure that we're within baseline. And what we did is we had a security assessments done every Sunday morning. We did auditing reports, reviewed those on a regular basis, and we used data discovery and data masking on a routine basis to mask data. So what would invariably happen is that once we hardened the environment from a security perspective, we created a baseline. Once that baseline was created, we reviewed it to make sure that nothing deviated from that. So think about this from this perspective. And Alicia will go more into details on this. We had constant people rolling in and off the project. There was people who had privileged access. Some people had to be removed out of the projects because they moved on to different things. that had to be maintained to make sure that we didn't have obsolete or orphaned users on the system. So this is a good way for us to really make sure that we had a clean and pristine environment. So think of DataSafe as a fully integrated cloud service and a dashboard to quickly assess and drill down and review our risk. And like I said, DataSafe is free for any Oracle OCI database customer. This is part of your subscription. So we did not incur a cost for this capability. This dashboard is what we looked at every Monday morning, and this is what we sent to our counties to make sure that we were in line with all our security profiles and posture assessment. This is my last slide before I turn over to Lychee, but I don't get caught up in the hours. Since I was the initial project manager and we were scoping out what the manpower effort was going to take, because we did have to bring people in and off the projects. As you can see, the yellow is what we had scoped out for data compliance and database enablement. Because we used Autonomous, because we used all these capabilities like DataSafe, Data Catalog, it significantly reduced our effort into getting those things in place and allowed us to really focus on the key high value tasks, such as reacting to our customer needs, changing the UI on a routine basis, adapting to the CDC guideline changes, and really more importantly, evolving the data model. We actually had to build a data model from scratch for this project. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lychee for him to talk about the legacy system as well as a new vaccination system that Lychee and his team built out. Go ahead, Lychee. Okay,
thank you, Nitin. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yep, thank you.
There you go. You should have access now.
Okay, let me see. Nope, I still have a problem. It cannot go forward.
Try now.
Try now?
Yep, you got it.
Oh, slower. Yep, so thank you everybody. Nitin has talked about the autonomous database a lot. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the applications. First is on the legacy appliance testing system. So this system consists of 5 applications. The first application is the registration piece. So it is a web application used by the end users, meaning that the patient, or you can call it citizens. This include the registration, the screening for the qualification, and approval workflow. And after the approval, obviously there's a application autonomous scheduling. The second application is a mobile application. The primary users are the healthcare workers work at the on-site facilities. They will validate the patient and the vehicles they drive, and they also do the patient check-in and check-out and reconciliation. So the next application is the site administration. There are lots of functionalities is loaded over here. So for example, is that they will do the appointment management. They will do the test result processing. They will set up facilities, etc. So there are lots of functionality over there. And the next application is the integration. So this is because the software system cannot do anything regarding the COVID, right? We have to integrate with the lab partners. The lab partner will download the testing orders from our system and upload the testing results to us. So we can get this workflow, vaccination, the diagnostics to have a circle, make sure everything is smooth. So lastly is the analytic application. So for this application, we have 2 dashboards. The public dashboard is linked to our customers' the public website, so their residents can look at the current pandemic situation. The private dashboard is used by the healthcare or CDC officials. So they look at the statistics, they can predict the future and make the right decision. So in the early August, we have read the news is that the pharmaceutical companies are developing the vaccines. So we wanted to start the development for the vaccine management system so that we can be ready for the, we were told is early December. Yeah, so we can use this system when the vaccine is ready. So so there are technical requirements from our side for developing this new vaccination system. So first thing is that it's a data-driven. First thing we wanted the database, just as Nitin said before, is we wanted to know our little administration and maintenance effort. And for the infrastructure, we want a less cost, easy provisioning, and less maintenance effort. And for the application, we need a responsive design. Meaning that majority of our users is going to use their cell phone or smartphones instead of a laptop. So we needed to our screen size to adopt to any of the devices. To reduce the development time, we wanted to reuse our legacy testing system applications, and we also wanted to have a less new deployment effort. And obviously, the development effort for the new things need to be developed. It should be a low development effort, should be less development skills set needed. So for the security, Nitin talk about a lot in his part, and I'm not going to repeat this. So okay. So let's look at what the new development and what new developments and what existing applications can be reused. So this is from legacy system. So there are two pieces of the new development, the registration and analytics. We want to bring them into the Oracle Cloud infrastructure for the three applications which already in the OCI. We want to reuse them, but with some sort of a refactoring. So the decisions is really driven by the time urgency, the last product cost, and the development deployment efforts. So we said that we want to use a autonomous database. This autonomous database is obvious choice, and data safe is an included feature and is a HIPAA compliance, as Nitin said. And from the infrastructure, when you provision the database, the autonomous database, there is no additional infrastructure service are required. So for the applications, we choose the Apex for all the 5 applications. That's because of the out-of-box features of the Apex and autonomous database. So we wanted to have a low development effort. So Apex is the local development. It requires that skill set needed for the new applications, and it is also is a less deployment effort. The applications are stored in the database. You just need to export the application and import to the another environment. So for the security, this is something I want to talk about. In addition, what Nitin said is that we use IDCS. The IDCS is first thing is easy integration with the Apex, and it is there is out-of-box identity federation. So we have to consider this. This is because our customers are not only the states, counties, but also could be the organizations such as that's a public transportation, that's a CTA. Yeah, so they contract their employee vaccination status. In this case, they don't need to register with our IDCS. We can integrate with their Active Directory. Yeah. So here is the legacy system and the new vaccination system architecture comparison. You will see on the right side is that we only use the IDCS and the autonomous database, and APACs and ORs are included during the ATP provisioning. So we also greatly simplified the operations application. So I will talk about that one later on. So before I talk about our challenges we faced during this development, let me first show you some of the screenshots. So the first one is the registration. So for the application scheduling, we use a QR code. We scan the QR code because this is highly contagious disease, right? Yeah, virus. So we don't want to. We want to minimize the contact between person. Yeah. So obviously we have the reporting piece. We have the dashboards I just talked about. There are private dashboards and the public dashboards, and we have the check-in, check-out application. That's the mobile application, and we have the site administration. So from here, I'm going to talk about the challenges we are faced. The first challenge is how do we integrate IDCS with APACs? So for the authenticating the user through the APACs is easy enough. Majorly, there are 3 steps. The first one is that you need to create a confidential application in IDCS and get the client ID and the secrets. So once you get that, you will create a web credentials in the APACs with the client ID and the secrets you got. And lastly, you are going to create a social sign-in authentication scheme in the APACs and use the appropriate endpoint settings. So I'm not going to go into details. The Oracle A team did an excellent blog and to show you step-by-step instruction. So we just resolve the authentication integration authentication with the IDCS. But here is the problem, right? How do we get the user into the IDCS as well as the APACs tables, right? So here the thing what I want to talk about is that first is the IDCS provide a very rich REST APIs we can use. So if you look at the diagram, is on the left is the registration user interface, right? So the user who wanted to register with the system, he will put their email address, put their first name, last name, and the password. So he hit the submit button. The APACs does all the work behind the scenes. The first thing is he will check the user exists or not. If it's not exist, it will make a REST call to the IDCS, get authentication token. Once he get authentication token, he can use this authentication token to create a user in the IDCS, and then we will create a user in the ATP tables and assign the user to a appropriate IDCS group, verify the user. Once all of this done is we will direct the user to the home page. Once we redirect the user homepage, this homepage need authentication. So the homepage will redirect the user to the IDCS login page. So the user will type in their email address, type their password, and then if authentication successful, it will redirect the user back as a login user. So there are some leftovers. You can see it. Some of the application is done in the in the React.js. So how do we do this in the Apex? So from the Luxy testing applications, this is for the check-in, check-out for the mobile applications we used is done in the React.js. We can either stitch this mobile application into the Apex, or we throw it away and rebuild it in the Apex. So the final decision is we decide to stitch this React.js app in Apex. The decision was made this due to the composition of the team at that point of time. We had a developer who was very proficient with React and had built this original app. So integrating the React.js with the Apex reduced the development effort. So this will allow the main Apex developers to create new applications instead of just rebuild this application. So here is how do we implement the React app, and from the functions and put it into the Apex without the big development effort. On the diagram above is that if you look at the calling sequence, right? It is from the user mobile device, is go to API gateway, is go to load balancer, is go to the compute node where the React is deployed, and it will go to the REST API, which is deployed in the Oracle functions server, and then the REST API will make a call to the database. So what we simplified this is that we import this React.js into the Apex, and we also going to create the REST API to replace the functions. So let me show you the major steps of what we did. Yeah, so the very first thing is we need to replace the functions server, right? The REST API services in the function server. So we will recreate this in the Apex. I have another slide done later on to talk about this. So after we done this, we will remap the REST endpoint using the newly created API in the React, and we compile the React app to get a JavaScript file uploaded into the static application files section in the Apex, and finally we go to reference this file in the source of a static region. So next thing I want to talk about, we want to talk about is the Dynamic Questionnaire engine. So why this is needed? So at early August, and it's also through the September, right? We read many vaccination plans from different states. So even with the CDC guideline, each state has their own vaccination plan, because we know there are initially the vaccination dosage are limited. We cannot do the vaccination at the beginning for everybody. We have to do the vaccination by phases. When we by phase, we have to have a set of a questionnaire for each let's say for each of the vaccination groups, right? So in that case, because each state could differ from the others, so we cannot define a set of a predefined questionnaire for different customers. So that's why this dynamic questionnaire engine came into the picture. So what we designed is the questionnaire can have one or more questions. Those questionnaire can have different types. You have a multiple choice, you have a select list, and you also can have a text box and the text areas. So the list and the choice are scored. The other text boxes are tracked. So we need a mean of rendering those questions dynamically for the user also. So for the next thing, I'm not going to talk about this. I will let our developer Tyler Limkin talk about this.
quick example of what it looks like to create some of these dynamic questionnaires. So here's our overall screening page. We've got our name, we've got our vaccine assigned to it, we've got a indicator that a questionnaire is required, we've got a message for a failed attempt, then we've got a minimum score of 20. From here, I can go and preview the questions. Right now, I'm only got 2 of them, but it'll show an example of what that'll look like on the end user side. From here, I can go in, I can create a question. My sequence will determine the order. So the greater the sequence, the later the question. Then I can paste in this question about asking about any chronic lung diseases. The weight is the score multiplier. High risk will determine whether or not they automatically get in if they have a high risk qualifier answer. So, we wanted that in case, well, maybe a healthcare worker may not meet all the criteria that we have. But if they're a healthcare worker, we want them to automatically get in. So we would turn the high risk question flag and the high risk answer flag to yes. And so that was one of the ways that we wanted to provide that option. We've also said that here in this question I'm making, the score is going to be 20. So if you pick yes, that means that you will reach the minimum score and allow you to pass in. From here, let's take a look at what this looks like on the other page. And so what does this look like for an end user going to this? So now I'm back at the registration page, and you'll notice a few changes that I made to the sequence and to the questions as a whole here. I didn't want to go through that whole demo of showing that because I want to make sure that I'm respectful of everyone's time. But here I'm going to go and put in all of these answers that will not qualify me. I don't have any conditions at the age of 65. And as you can see, I've shifted down this question and shifted up the lung disease question. Again, I just did that by changing the sequence. And again, this is designed for business users with no development experience or no development, any sort of development tools. We just wanted this to be easy and flexible and to be able to be done by any person. So from here, I'll then check and I'll get a chance to submit and confirm, and then it's going to tell me that I'm not eligible. So I can go back here, I can at a later time, and I can try this question again. Go in, pick that appointment, proceed on, and I can go this time fill out the information different way. A chronic lung disease, and when I submit that, as you can see, it gives me the score of 20. It's going to say, based on my response, I'm eligible for a screening. And so it can take that and it takes me on to the next stage of this process. And so now let's kind of talk about what this looks like from a data structure perspective. So one of the aspects of developing on the fly and so quickly like this is sometimes your table names are a little interesting. Namely, we've got test type, which originally we pulled from the testing platform, but took all of those reuse and recycle pieces rather than rebuilding all of that architecture. We figured we could just take advantage of that table and add a new key to the vaccine table, which will track whether or not something is a vaccine and track any key information about that vaccine, such as the dosage and the date, all that. But for now, let's just keep talking about this dynamic questionnaire. So when a user comes in and to take a questionnaire, they get a screening ID, and that screening ID will keep track of all the responses, which will have a screening ID of their own. So one screening will have many screening responses. And again, all these test questions that we created earlier get stored within the test questions table, and they have a key to the test type. For multiple choice and select list kind of questions, we have these answer values. And then finally, we have this answer domain, which is going to determine how a specific question is rendered. And so when it's all said and done, if you want to just query the flat structure of their responses, we've got the response table here. So this will track all of their answers, and as you can see, we're not pointing to a specific answer value ID. Instead, we are scraping the current state of the answer, the question rate, score, and the risk category. And we did that because we wanted to make sure that as someone changed these, maybe they refined them later on. We didn't want that to go and interfere with something that's already been in the past, especially if it's been for a few months ago or even further. And so we wanted that to be flexible. And so how does this all take place over here? And so this is where the flexibility of Apex really comes in handy, because we can take a custom SQL query, we can append a function into it, and then we can render the HTML that's delivered by that function in a classic report region, and use that to create a dynamic questionnaire that's built from scratch. And so here, this is just our get answer line function. It's going to take in the question number, the screen ID, and the question ID, and it's going to generate the question from that. And so the first thing it'll do is it'll populate the variables that it needs, and then it's going to specifically look for this UI type. And based on this UI type, it's going to call a different function after that. So we've got a quick example of this generate list of values. And so this will take in the response ID, the question number, and the question text, as well as the question ID. And it'll then create an answer cursor, because we want to go through and iterate through each of the answer questions. And it'll create the appropriate HTML. So here we're going to create an option box. It's going to put in the number of options there are, and make sure that they iterate each time, adding a new loop to that. And you can add in a new option value right here, and then it's going to close out that HTML. So that when it's all said and done, you can render that within, like I said, this classic report region, just turning off escape HTML. And then again, the robustness of Apex, giving both PL SQL and JavaScript and SQL options, all without us having to worry about configuring in other ways to interpret, really gave us this advantage. So here we can use JavaScript to kind of parse through and make sure that everything has been filled in, make sure that we take all of that and we append it, take all the answers and put it into a format that we can then use PL SQL to go and parse through. So we're using the Apex string split package, and we're going to take that, the answers where we put all of the answers that they've just created. We're going to save those answers into the associated row, and then we're going to score the test. And once the score has been determined, that'll check for eligibility. So Apex again took this complicated problem and it allowed us to use simple tools to solve it. And speaking of using simple tools to solve it, we still have the question of how do we view this data in a meaningful way? This is data from a flat table. This is all dynamic data. We don't know exactly what the questions are going to be asked, and so we were able to leverage the interactive report and what was built into it to provide meaningful analytics options for our end users, to allow them to look at the data in a meaningful way, while still allowing our structure to be incredibly dynamic. A quick example of what it looks like to create.
So let me take over. So I do want to take a 1 minute to talk about the Apex with DevOps and the microservice development. So traditionally, the contiguous integration and deployment is pretty hard. This is because individual development environment is expensive and it's difficult to or a large effort to do the provisioning. And the second reason is that database and the Apex code are stored in the database. Track those changes and merge those changes are pretty hard. So with the new provisioning and development tools, the CI/CD made it easy and it can be automated. So here are some of the points, right? So the autonomous database in the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, you can provision an instance with Apex. It's just in 5 to 6 minutes, and you get the Terraform. If you don't want to use the OCI console, you can do it. You can automate this task. And we also have the testing framework for the PL/SQL and the SQL-CL from the Oracle and liquid base. This is easy upgrade, update, track, and manage databases schemes, schema changes. And there are two Oracle product managers. So Brian and Jeff, they did an excellent CSAD presentation and demo. So you can look at the recordings, at least the links over here. So next, I'm going to talk about the microservices. So if you recall what we said in the legacy application, they are using the API gateway, and then from the API gateway we go to the load balancer. From the load balancer we go to the compute nodes, and from compute nodes we go to the functions, and from functions finally reach the database, right? So with Apex, especially for the DBAs, SQL developer, and Apex developer, this can be the Apex is perfectly a microservice implementation. It confirms the majority, the most important microservice principles. So as that said, I highly encourage the DBAs, the developers, if you know the Apex well, and even if you don't know, it's very easy. You can throw out a data-driven microservice in 30 minutes. So it's local development and low cost of deployment. So as I said, I will talk about the Apex advantage. So first thing is the development started on the Apex 19. Over the course of the development, we automatically upgrade to Apex 20.x. Over the course of the development, we had over 20 developers, architects, and the DBA touch this product at all different times. The members were on this product from anywhere from 1 month to a year, and they are all part-time. It's their time allocated to this product is 5 to 40 hours. Yeah, and for the main developer development team, for the Apex experience is ranged from let's say from very skilled developers and to somebody which is pretty new. So why does all that matters? So the first thing is that it's transparent upgrade. It's painless. Sometimes we didn't even notice in our development environment, and it's a local development in the Apex drastically decrease the knowledge overhead required to contribute to this product. So this because it is a developer-based browser-based application builder UI, and it's because of the simplicity of the PL/SQL, the developer were able to pick it up and run it faster, and the Apex application builder is allow the developers to find the answers for themselves instead of spinning their wheels. So from this slide, Nitin, you can take over from here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Li. Yeah, and I kind of want to quickly go through, so we're just about nearing the end of this session. This is very similar to the earlier slide I showed, the total number of hours that we spent on the project. As you can see, as we progressed through the project, our second, third, and fourth, fifth, whatever it was, MVP, or minimal viable product that we kept on rolling every 2 weeks or so. We spent more and more time on the high value stuff, front-end development, the data modeling, the Apex administration, the middleware aspect of it. The core pieces, which is really to get the functionality out, was the key piece. And we spent very, very little time on the database, the IDCS, or even the data compliance, because much of that was automated through products such as DataSafe and Autonomous. And with that, I kind of want to summarize. And again, I want to really underscore and emphasize what Li mentioned before, is that, first of all, this is a real world deployment. There's no product pitch here. And this was developed as a grassroots effort. And like I said, we said before, this is a free application to the counties. but it wasn't free to us, and we still had to deal with manpower, especially manpower that's rotating in and out of the projects quite often. So simplicity, scalability, efficiency were key components, key requirements for us, and that's why we chose Autonomous Database specifically for the out-of-box security, the manageability, and efficiency. Data Catalog was our go-to for data governance and classification. And as, like I said before, I can't say this enough. Data saved our day, and it gave us the green light to really give us the security posture oversight overview for the entire application. It was really a unified control center. So really, from a complete end-to-end solid security and system management, but this is only possible through a cloud services, and specifically Oracle Cloud. And database, the autonomous database features, as well as Apex, were the key to solving this problem. And as you can see, we quickly pivoted from our legacy system that we built in March and augmented it with Apex capabilities to build the vaccination system, which we're continuing to grow and expand that application as we go forward with the new testing routines that we see that it's out in the field. And with that, I think we are done. Thank you guys so much for allowing us to showcase our application that we're really proud of building, and we're proud that we were able to be part of this grassroots effort. It was really exciting to do this for the last year, almost year and a half or so. Thank you, guys. And
thanks so much, Nitin. There was one question: is this the COVID19-rx.org app? But I went to that, and I believe that's the patient monitoring system, also built by Oracle on Apex.
Yeah. So there's keep buying. I think there's probably just under a dozen COVID applications that Oracle was.
So let me take this question. There are quite, I would say, quite a few COVID applications donated by Oracle. So for me, I'm working on the third one. It's a data clearinghouse. But now I look at the questions over here, the COVID19.oracle.com and the COVID-rx.org are not our application. Our application is specific to each of the county, each of our customers. Some of those are private over here. So it is not any of those two URLs over there.
But it is written in Oracle.
Yeah, it's written in Oracle. I can guarantee you majority of at least the 3 applications attached, the Apex is the backbone for the applications.
All right. Well, I want to thank our speakers and look forward to seeing you in the next 3 days. And thanks everybody for coming, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.